On this episode, we are going to be upgrading the front suspension on the 2021 Chevy Silverado 1500 Trail Boss. We are going to be installing the King Coilovers 2.5 and upgrading the upper control arms with some Mazzullas. So let's get started with the project. So the first thing we're going to do is remove these 10 millimeters. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 for the wheel speed sensor and the wear brake pan sensor wiring. So we're going to remove those. So once you got your 4 10 millimeters bolts loosened up, you have the brake line and your harness just hanging, and we'll just set to the side. We don't have to remove anything. So next thing you want to do is remove the lower sway bar end link or the bolt, so the lower control arm could extend when it comes to removing the control arm or the coilover. So removing that lower nut for the sway bar, which is an 18 millimeter, and we got to hold it with the 9 millimeter so it doesn't spin. When that's loosened up, you could see that's freely. The next thing you want to do is remove this upper control arm to the spindle bolt and get that loose. So we're going to break loose that 18 millimeter nut. Next thing, we're going to whack it with the hammer to break that loose. So before we break the upper spindle loose from the upper control arm ball joint, we want to make sure we support this, so when we hit it, this doesn't just go swinging down, and the last thing we want to do is pop that axle. So we're going to break it loose. Just like that, and we want to prevent this from swinging down. Now what we're going to do is remove the 2 bolts that hold the strut to the lower control arm. So the next step to remove the stock rancher chocks is going to be to remove these 3 upper 18 bolts that hold the strut to the upper part of the chassis. So once we have everything loosened up, those 2 bottom bolts and those 3 upper nuts, that's why we have this jack here. What we want to do is lower it, because this won't come out. There's not enough clearance. So we want to lower slightly, but not enough to where the axle pops out. Just like that. Now we can remove this. So once we have everything loose, kind of go down. There you have it. Next thing we got to do is remove these 221s on the bolt and nut, and we should be able to remove the upper control arm. So once we got all those nuts loose, just remove the bolts, and that control arm's done. The next thing we want to do with the upgraded control arms, we got to cut this bump stop because we're going to have more travel, and of course we don't want to prevent that from hitting. So we're going to be cutting that after we replace it with the Mazzulla upper control arms. So what we want to do, the instruction says that you could pry this, you could bend it and it'll break, but what we're going to do, we're going to cut straight across and follow that line. Of course, we're going to be using this cutoff wheel. You're going to be careful that you don't cut any of these wirings, because that could be an issue. So be careful, set this to the side, and we're going to start cutting away. Once you cut it off, there's a piece. Just make sure it's nice and clean and flush. And the next thing is to do is install the new upper control arms. These are the Mazzulla's upper control arms that we are going to be installing on this build. They do come with the uniball or stronger reinforcement there. We're going to be using the stock hardware to mount these. So we did use the factory hardware, like the bolts and the nuts. So we're going to put these on, and we're going to tighten these to manufacturer spec, and then from there we're going to be putting the King coilover on the vehicle, and we'll be torquing everything down to spec. So we just put the king coilover in the truck. It does come with its own hardware. So you got the bolts, we put some Loctite. We're gonna tighten up the bolts and we're gonna torque them to what King wants us to torque them to. So here we have our uniball. We are gonna be installing it to the upper control arm. You did put a little bit of anti-seize and red Loctite for the bolt hardware. Once we're gonna torque this to spec, as recommended through the Mazzulla. So we'll torque that here in a bit once we get the spindle. But next thing we gotta do is line up our sway bar and the coilover bolts that comes with their own hardware. Next, you know, we're gonna be torquing to spec the bottom two bolts with that hardware that came with the King shocks coilovers. We do that to both sides. And we're all set. So once the King coilover is all set up, we have our bolts tightened up. We're going to torque both of these uniball and the spindle to spec. Sometimes you might have to hold it in order for you to torque it. Just like that. Next thing you gotta do is put the dust cap. We'll hook up our sway bar and we'll attach all the harness. And the last thing we gotta do is put the bracket for the reservoir there, and we should be all done. We're gonna be torquing down the lower sway bar bolt or nut, and we tighten that to spec as per manufacturer. So the last thing we want to do is basically to put our hardware or bracket is remove that 13 that's right there. We're going to attach our reservoir to the bracket and we're going to be mounting it next. So here we go, we're all done with the project. We'll install the King's 2.5 coilovers with the Mazzulla upper control arms on the truck. We did gain about 2.5 inches in the front. The truck is about level. We do have the rear King shocks as well on this vehicle. We are going to be doing some adjustments. From there, we are going to take it off-roading, so stay tuned for our next video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys like it. Make sure you guys hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe if you guys want to see more content like this. Till next time.